She saved a billionaire's life, vanished without a word, until he found her feeding his triplets. Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to Alcott Stories, your favorite place for love, mystery, and stories that touch the soul. Before we dive into this emotional roller coaster, I want to know, where in the US are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Drop your city and time in the comments below. Let's connect coast to coast. Tonight's story will move you to your core. What would you do if the woman who saved your life disappeared only to be found years later, feeding your triplets? And what if she didn't ask for money or fame, just the right to live in peace? This is a powerful tale of truth, motherhood, second chances, and a woman who discovered her worth and made the world see it too. So stay with us. You do not want to miss what happens next. But first, let's begin with a prayer for you. Dear Lord, bless everyone watching tonight. Touch their hearts, bring comfort to their struggles, and remind them that they are stronger than any storm they're facing. May this story inspire hope, healing, and love. Now get comfortable, turn up the volume, and let the story begin. You're watching Alcott Stories. The storm howled like a beast outside, battering the clinic windows as Zara, her tired hands trembling from another double shift, scrubbed dried blood from her palms, unaware that her night was about to change forever. Thunder cracked through the sky as if warning her heart, and just as she was locking up the clinic door, headlights flickered violently through the darkness before vanishing off the road in a screech. Instinct overtook exhaustion. She kicked off her heels, grabbed her medkit, and sprinted through the pounding rain with only lightning to light her path. Her feet sank into mud, her hair clung to her skin, and her breath came in gasps as she found the twisted metal wreckage at the edge of the ravine. Smoke hissed from the hood. The air reeked of gasoline and fear. Her heart pounded faster when she saw him, bloodied, slumped over the steering wheel, his face pale against the dashboard lights. She forced the jammed door open with all her strength, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. Alive, barely, she shone her flashlight on his ID and nearly gasped. Ethan Hart, the elusive billionaire, whose face she'd only seen on business news clips in passing, now broken and bleeding in her hands. There was no time to process it. She whispered to herself, "You're not dying tonight. I won't let you," and set to work. With only the contents of her worn medical bag, she cleaned a deep wound across his forehead, wrapped his bleeding arm, and stabilized his fractured ribs with pieces of torn cloth and ingenuity. Her hands were soaked in his blood, her clothes drenched by the storm, but she never paused. Not when his eyes flickered open for a second, looking at her like she was something celestial. Not even when he tried to speak but only coughed up blood. She hushed him gently, her voice tender yet firm, assuring him he would live even if he didn't believe it. Every second felt like it might be the last. She dialed an old EMT friend, begging for discreet backup, refusing to let paparazzi or executives swarm the scene. No sirens, no media, just a life that needed saving. As minutes dragged like hours, she sang a lullaby under her breath, not for him but for herself, to keep her soul from unraveling under the weight of his fragile breaths. When the rescue arrived, she slipped away into the shadows, soaked to the bone, her heart oddly full yet heavy. No one asked who she was, and she never gave a name. As paramedics swarmed him, she walked back through the night as though nothing had happened. But nothing was the same. That night she had held a billionaire's life in her hands, seen him not as powerful or untouchable, but as human, broken, and afraid. She had saved him, stitched his life together with her bare hands, and vanished without leaving a name, a note or a footprint behind. And as the storm faded and dawn began to break, Zara disappeared into the quiet, unaware that her silent act of compassion would set in motion a love story that fate had been waiting to write. The sterile hum of machines and the slow, steady beeping of a heart monitor greeted Ethan Hart as he blinked against the harsh hospital lights, the ceiling above him foreign, the air sharp with antiseptic and uncertainty. Pain laced through every inch of his body. But deeper than the fractured ribs and stitched wounds was a confusion he couldn't shake, memories blurred, voices muffled, yet one face refused to fade. Brown skin glistening with rain, soft eyes filled with fire and fearlessness, hands that trembled yet never faltered. She had been there, hadn't she? His heart raced, not from pain, but from the haunting image of the woman who had pulled him from death's grasp. The doctors called it a miracle. The media called it fate. They splashed headlines with phrases like, "Billionaire saved by mystery angel." Yet not a single photo, name, or detail surfaced. No one could find her. And Ethan, once a man ruled by numbers, deadlines and deals, suddenly found himself obsessed not with his empire, but with her. He cancelled his meetings without explanation, ignored texts from his fiancée, who fumed over his silence, and sat in his penthouse staring at security footage from the crash scene, only to find the storm had swallowed everything. He hired private investigators, offered rewards, even visited the clinic nearest to the crash. But every trail was colder than the steel he built his wealth on. His board was panicking, stockholders questioning his sanity, and whispers buzzed that Ethan Hart was losing his grip. But he didn't care. He remembered the way she looked at him, not as a billionaire, but as a man fighting for breath. That kind of look stays under the skin. He even wandered into shelters and street clinics incognito, hoping to catch a glimpse, anything familiar. But the city seemed to mock him with every turn, and still his dreams were filled with her. He'd wake in cold sweats whispering her name, though he didn't even know it. His fiancée, Vanessa, whose love had grown colder with every zero in his bank account, finally gave him an ultimatum: choose her ghost or me. And to her horror, he chose the ghost. She stormed out, leaving behind only a diamond ring and a bitter silence. Still, Ethan searched. He spent nights in libraries researching small-town healers, checked through charity organizations, combed rural nurse registries, and every time he thought he found a match, it wasn't her. His friends begged him to stop, to move on, to find closure. But how could he? She had saved him when she didn't have to. She had vanished without asking for credit or reward. Who does that in his world of fame, greed, and ego? Only someone who had something deeper, something to protect. What was she hiding? Was she in danger? Did she regret saving him? Of hidden truth collided in that one moment. Her lips parted in shock, but no words came. The spoon fell from her hand and clattered to the dirt. Ethan's heart pounded louder than it had the day of the crash. She hadn't changed her number, hadn't reached out, hadn't asked for anything, and now here she was, beating 3 heartbeats that echoed his own. The boy closest to her toddled over to Ethan and stared curiously, tilting his head with the same boyish smirk Ethan had as a child. "Hi," the boy said innocently, no clue of the silent storm he'd just stirred. Zara rushed forward and scooped him up, her voice shaking as she mumbled, "Liam, say hello later," and trying to shield him as if that could protect the secret. But the damage was done. Ethan knelt, numb, eyes still bouncing between the children, his voice barely a whisper. There! Mine, aren't they? Zara didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes shimmered, not with guilt, but fear, the fear of losing the little world she built in secret. His fingers clenched, a cocktail of betrayal and awe flooding him. She had carried this alone, raised them, fed them, loved them, and never once came to him. Why? He asked, voice cracking, the weight of lost time pressing on his chest. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, staring at her children as if they were about to be taken. Behind them, villagers went about their day, unaware that a storm more powerful than any monsoon was about to unravel years of sacrifice. Ethan stood taller now, not with power, but with disbelief. Zara, he whispered, the name finally having a shape, a sound, a story. She held her children tighter as if bracing for a battle. And in that still moment, with dust swirling and the sun dipping low, Ethan realized that the woman he had searched for wasn't just hiding from him. She had been guarding something sacred, not just a secret, but a legacy. His legacy. 3 heartbeats born of one forgotten night, and a love he hadn't even known existed. Zara stood frozen, her children clinging to her legs, her breath shallow and uneven, as Ethan's whisper echoed in the air like a wound ripping open. They're mine, aren't they? The truth, heavy and unspoken for years, pressed against her chest like a rising tide, and suddenly, silence was no longer protection, it was suffocation. She stepped back, shielding the children as though love alone could deflect the coming storm. Ethan took a slow step closer, but not out of anger, out of disbelief, as if trying to piece together a reality too wild to accept. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I didn't mean to disappear. I had to. His brows furrowed, the pain in his eyes impossible to ignore. She turned her gaze to the ground, unable to meet the hurt she had caused. You were in that hospital for weeks. She began, her voice soft but splintered. Not just days. You don't remember because they sedated you. And no one was allowed in except me. No one wanted the responsibility, but I couldn't walk away. Her fingers clutched the fabric of her dress as she continued. I nursed you, watched over you when your body gave up, whispered to you in the dark when I wasn't sure you'd make it. She paused, a tear sliding silently down her cheek. You opened your eyes one night and smiled at me. You thought I was a dream. And then, her voice cracked, then we crossed a line neither of us expected. Ethan's breath caught. His world tilted. Zara raised her eyes, fierce now despite the tears. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you were discharged. You don't remember it. Maybe it was just survival, instinct, emotion. But it wasn't meaningless to me. She reached for the smallest of the triplets, her voice trembling with guilt. I knew your name, your world. I knew what people like you do when secrets like me show up. I was terrified that my children would grow up with a father who denied them, or worse, used them for image. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. She continued before he could speak. I couldn't imagine walking into your skyscraper world, holding my belly, asking you for help, and watching you look at me like a stranger. Her chin lifted defiantly, so I chose not to ask. I chose love instead of a lifetime of begging. She gestured to the tiny feet around her. I raised them with bedtime stories, not brand names. I gave them morning kisses, not headlines. We didn't have wealth, but we had freedom. And every time I saw your face on TV, I told myself I was doing the right thing. Her eyes welled again, but she didn't cry like a victim. She shook like a mother. Finally dropping her shield, I ran not because I hated you, but because I couldn't bear to be erased. I couldn't risk you saying they weren't yours. And I couldn't risk you loving them just out of duty. Ethan's jaw tightened as truth crashed over him, not like thunder but like quiet heartbreak. You should have told me, he said softly, pain lacing every syllable. Zara nodded, swallowing hard. Maybe, but I was a nobody to your world, and I was scared. Scared I'd walk into a boardroom and be silenced by suits and scandal. Scared your mother would see me as a threat. Scared I'd be told to disappear with hush money and silence. Her voice broke then, for real. I didn't want to be your shame. The children watched quietly, sensing the tension. unaware their entire lives were being rewritten in that moment. Ethan slowly dropped to one knee, not before her, but before them. "They are not a mistake," he whispered. "You are not a mistake. You are the only real thing in a world that almost destroyed me." And as Zara looked down at him, her heart both fractured and blooming, she realized this was the moment she had feared and longed for all at once. She had run for survival. But now, standing before the man whose blood pulsed in her children's veins, she faced the question that terrified her most. Had she run away from something she was always meant to run toward? The silence that followed Zara's confession hung between them like a blade, and Ethan, still kneeling, rose slowly, his face shadowed with something deeper than rage: regret. Regret for time stolen, for birthdays missed, for lullabies he'd never sung. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Let me be their father, please." Zara looked at him, torn between the ache in his voice and the terror of the chaos that followed him. "Your world," she said softly, "it chews people up. It chews women like me up." But Ethan shook his head. "Then I'll burn it down for you." His words weren't poetic, they were desperate. He stayed in the village, cancelling everything again, playing with the children as if trying to rewrite every missing year in a single day. He cooked with Zara, made clumsy attempts at braiding hair, wiped chocolate from chins, and sat under starlit skies, listening to stories he should have known. But peace has a short shelf life in the life of a billionaire. One careless photo, Zara handing juice to the kids while Ethan held a sleeping child in his arms, circulated on social media. Within hours, tabloids screamed headlines like "Billionaire's secret love nest." And is this the real reason Ethan left his fiancée? His inbox flooded, his board demanded explanations, and the media painted Zara as a gold digger, a manipulator, a nobody grasping for power. Old photos of her working at clinics were dug up, twisted to fit damaging narratives. Reporters camped outside the village gates. But the cruelest blow came not from strangers, but from the woman who still held a key to his name. Vanessa, his former fiancée, returned with venom. She held press conferences, tearfully claiming betrayal, even hinting that Zara had entrapped Ethan, suggesting the children might not even be his. She saw a rich man in a hospital bed and seized her opportunity, she said through crocodile tears. Zara watched the broadcast in silence, her face pale, her fingers gripping the arm of a chair as her dignity was gutted in front of millions. Ethan tried to stop it. He issued statements, denied Vanessa's claims, even threatened legal action. But once the fire was lit, it spread faster than truth. Zara couldn't walk to the market without whispers. Strangers pointed, mothers shielded their children, and in the eyes of her own village, she felt the warmth of respect cool into cautious distance. One night, as her children slept peacefully, Zara sat alone in the dark, staring at Ethan across a flickering candle. "You said you'd burn your world down," she whispered. "But it's burning me instead." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, tears building behind her brave front. "They don't care who I am. Just that I'm not you." Her voice trembled but never broke. "They will never let me live in your light without trying to turn it against me." Ethan paced, furious, helpless. "Then we'll fight back. We'll sue them all. I'll issue statements. She stopped him gently. "You can't fix this with power. Power is what started this." Her eyes, tired but fierce, met his. "I don't want our children to grow up as headlines. I want them to climb trees, scrape knees, live without cameras in their faces or scandals in their names." Ethan sat down, burying his face in his hands. "Then what do you want from me?" She looked at him, not with hatred but heartbreaking honesty. "I want you to see that love is not always loud. Sometimes it's hidden, protected, private." She walked to the doorway, pausing as the wind tugged at her braid. "I don't want to walk away again, Ethan, but I won't let your world devour what I built with my bare hands." And with that, she left him in the quiet, forcing him to face the truth. Love wasn't just about claiming. It was about choosing. And if he wanted her and the children in his life, he had to choose not just them, but the world they needed to survive. The door closed softly behind Zara as she stepped into the night, leaving Ethan surrounded by silence and the weight of his own powerlessness. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. The thought of losing them again, of watching his children fade into another silence. He couldn't break, gripped him with panic. And so, out of desperation more than malice, he filed for custody. His lawyers moved swiftly, spinning words into arguments, drafting petitions, building a case that on paper painted him as the stable provider. News spread like wildfire. Billionaire seeks custody of secret triplets. The media feasted on it. Whispers spread that Ethan Hart was reclaiming what was his. But Zara, she didn't panic. She didn't crumble. The woman who once hid from his world now walked straight into it. On the morning of the hearing, she stepped into the courtroom not in designer clothes or borrowed dignity, but in grace, strength, and a plain blue dress that shimmered with truth. Her chin was high, her children beside her, their small hands gripping hers like anchors. Across the room, Ethan's eyes flickered with conflict. He hadn't meant to hurt her, only to keep her close. But here, in the cold formality of court, his choices suddenly looked like shackles. When the judge called her forward, Zara didn't bring lawyers. She brought her voice. And when she began to speak, the courtroom fell silent, not from fear, but reverence. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "I did not steal these children. I gave them life. I gave them food when I was hungry. I gave them warmth when we had no heat. I gave them bedtime stories when all I had were worries. I gave them love when the world gave me fear." The judge leaned forward. Reporters' pens froze midair. She continued, "I never told their father, not because I wanted to erase him, but because I feared he would erase us. Because I knew the world would believe I was after his wealth, not protecting their peace." She paused, looking at Ethan, her eyes soft but resolute. "I raised them in silence, not shame. I chose to be their mother, not a scandal. I taught them to say please before power and thank you before fame." Her hands trembled now, but she didn't stop. "He is their blood, yes, but I am their rhythm, their routines, their scraped knees and morning songs. I'm the reason they know they are loved without needing a last name." Ethan's heart ached as he listened, each word unraveling his legal argument like thread from a worn tapestry. She turned to the judge again. "This is not about keeping them from him. It's about making sure they stay whole, that they are not pawns in a war of money and pride." The courtroom sat frozen. Even Ethan's own lawyer lowered his head. And then something shifted. Ethan rose slowly, walked forward, and stood beside her. "She's right," he said, voice hoarse. This isn't what I wanted. I just didn't know how to stop losing them." He turned to the judge. "I withdraw the case." Gasps rippled through the room. Zara's lips parted in shock. "I want to be their father," he continued, "but not like this, not through war. I want to earn my place in their lives, not seize it through fear." The judge, moved by the honesty from both sides, nodded solemnly. "Then start over, together, not as combatants, but as parents." Cameras clicked, pens scribbled, and the world saw not a custody battle, but the quiet rise of a mother crowned by dignity. When they stepped out of the courthouse, the media waited, hungry for drama, but what they saw instead was Ethan placing his arm gently around Zara, not in possession but in respect. And in that moment, the world didn't see a billionaire and a forgotten woman. They saw two people brave, enough to put the children first. And for the first time, Zara didn't feel like she was walking through someone else's storm. She was standing in her own sunlight. As the courthouse doors closed behind them and flashes from cameras dimmed into memory, Zara stood on the steps with her head held high, not as someone who had won a battle, but as a woman who had reclaimed her voice. Ethan stood beside her, quieter than usual, not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew this was not his moment to speak, it was hers. He watched her with a reverence that hadn't existed before, not just as the mother of his children or the woman who saved his life, but as someone who had fought silently, loved fiercely, and risen beautifully through a storm meant to break her. That evening, as the children laughed in the kitchen, splashing milk on the floor and dancing barefoot on the tiles, Ethan sat Zara down. No contracts, no speeches, just sincerity. "I don't want to fix you," he said softly. "I just want to stand beside you, as your partner, in business, in parenting, in whatever future you choose. Zara smiled, but it wasn't the soft, hesitant smile of the past. It was one born from knowing. She didn't owe anyone her presence, not even him. "I don't need saving," she whispered. "I need space to rise." And he nodded, accepting her terms not as compromise, but as clarity. In the weeks that followed, while media outlets moved on to fresher scandals, Zara moved quietly and purposefully. With Ethan's financial backing, but her vision and leadership, she founded the Quiet Crown, a foundation built for single mothers who had once been silenced, overlooked or dismissed. She didn't want luxury press releases or staged photographs. She wanted change, real, gritty, and lasting. She stood before crowds of women who had known heartbreak, abandonment, and solitude, and gave them more than speeches. She gave them tools, support, identity. Ethan, often standing behind the scenes, watched her shine in places he had never dared to imagine her in. And slowly, the woman who once disappeared into storms became the name whispered in hope-filled rooms. Her children thrived, not in palaces, but in truth. They ran through gardens Ethan built for them, read stories Zara wrote herself, and knew that bedtime kisses came from a mother who had chosen to rise above fear. Love for Zara came slowly, not because it lacked depth, but because it now required honor. Ethan didn't ask again. He simply stayed through tantrums, triumphs, early morning feedings, and foundation fundraisers. One night, under a sky scattered with stars, as the children slept and laughter still lingered in the air, Zara reached for his hand. "You stayed," she said quietly, "not because you had to, but because you chose to." He looked at her, eyes soft and shimmering. "You taught me how." And in that moment, she didn't say yes with words. She said it with the way her shoulders relaxed, the way her fingers curled into his, the way her soul finally exhaled. They didn't marry right away. There were no magazine spreads, no gala announcements. Just life, full of scraped knees, midnight phone calls, long hugs and shared dreams. She wore no diamond crown, but every room she entered felt her presence. Ethan no longer led empires for power. He led with purpose. And whenever someone asked how he turned his life around, he would simply say, "A woman who knew her worth taught me mine." In the end, Zara didn't just get love. She got freedom, choice, respect. She didn't settle into a man's world. She built one beside him. And as her children grew up watching her stand tall, they never once questioned if their mother had been afraid. Because all they saw was a woman who walked through fire and didn't just survive, she built a legacy out of the ashes.